See the number of participants continuing to rise up, but I think what we'll do is we'll get started, and then as people come in, that's fine. I want to try to keep on a time frame. So hi everyone. I gotta say I'm excited to be here to talk about agriculture today. I've been looking forward to this ever since we decided that we would do this as one of our series in Career Connections. My name is Jennifer, and I'm going to be facilitating this session today. I work in the Career Development Department with Women in Resource Development. And I'll give a little overview in a few minutes about who WRDC is. Before we get started, I'd like to do our very important land acknowledgement. Honoring traditional territory. We respectfully acknowledge the territory in which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk and the island of Newfoundland as the ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq and Beothuk. We would also like to recognize the Innu and Inuit and their ancestors as the original peoples of Labrador. We strive for respectful relationships with all peoples of this province, and as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation and honor this beautiful land together. And that's lovely because we are going to be talking about land today as well. So there's a few housekeeping things I'd like to chat about before we get into the next piece. Firstly, I need to thank Kara. So I'm here front and center, but Kara Howell is the person that's brought us all together today. The emailing, the connecting, the making the schedule. So thank you, Kara. Wouldn't be able to do this without you. So this is a space for everyone to have a voice. And whether or not this is your first webinar or your first experience joining such an event, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. We're all in different places on this journey, and whether that be in technology or diversity or learning about different industries. And we have different experiences to bring to this discussion. So, and we always value when you can bring your voice forward to share your experiences. Respect is is the foundation of what we do, and the language of what we do is constantly changing, and we do our best to keep up. So if you find that we've used language that you feel isn't present day or there's been updates, you can feel free to pop it in the chat, and we would greatly appreciate that. At the end of the information session, we will be having a question and answer period. So if you have questions, you can type them in the box and we'll make sure that we discuss them. I think there might be lots of questions today based on the content that I know to be being shared today. So I'm just going to give a quick little overview for some of you who may not know who Women in Resource Development is, or WRDC. So we've been around the province for about 25 years, and really with the premise of increasing women's participation in technology and skilled trades. And really you can look at that a broader scope when we think about all kinds of different industries and where women are underrepresented. I haven't got recent stats on agriculture, but I'm sure Chelsea or Heather may have those kinds of stats. I'm not sure, but oftentimes we do see women are underrepresented in lots of bigger industries. So when we talk about women, it is a broad scope. It's not a small lens in which we look at. So as you see on our screen, women refers to anyone who identifies as a woman and explicitly includes not only cis women, but also trans women. Anyone who identifies as non-binary, non-conforming, and/or gender fluid, and anyone irrespective of assigned gender at birth, gender identity, and gender expression, who has experienced or is subject to experiencing discrimination based on identifying as a woman and/or being identified as others as a woman. So we'd like to put that out there so to know that it encapsulates a lot of different things. So we have 4 arms of our organization, and all doing really neat programs and services within community. The STEM for Girls, which you can see a picture there of a STEM for Girls program, is really about the exposure ahead of the game of when we work with women down the road. They say, "Oh, I wish I'd known that about that in junior high," or "I wish I'd known about that in high school." So we try to push ahead against that by having the real hands-on exposure. My daughter was involved in a STEM program about 10 years ago, and she built a go-kart. So she was at a with wood. So she was at a College of North Atlantic campus using power tools. She had a hard helmet on, she had safety goggles on, she was in the carpentry unit, and that was fantastic. So it's about those exposure programs. We also have career development and employment assistance services for women. So that's where I've mainly had my focus too in my time with WRDC. And that's, again, reaching out to the women who are in communities saying, I really want to work in a trade or a technology. I know that I want to work with tools. How do I go about that? What's out there for me? It gives us a chance to talk about the barriers and myths that they may have about what it means to enter in those occupations. I'm trying to keep up with my notes here now because I have a tendency to veer off. We also do different trainings and services for employers. So ensuring that employers have awareness about when they hear things like gender and diversity and equity and inclusion. A lot of times there's some lack of information and quality information about that. So there are trainings available. And also research, collaboration, and partnerships with stakeholders. So working with industry, working with post-secondary to identify solutions that sometimes come up about recruitment, retention for women in different industries. So it's a nice four-pronged approach, a holistic approach to working in this capacity. So now we're at the really fun part of this session, and that's hearing from our guest speakers. Today, we're happy to say we have Chelsea Foley with us from Newfoundland and Labrador Federation of Agriculture. Thank you, Chelsea. And Heather Zurel from Vinland Acres Forest Farm and owner of Data Farms with NL Young Farmers member. I'm so appreciative of both of you joining, because out of all of our projects and programs we do at WRDC, this really gets that knowledge is power, which I love, that out to people, the knowledge of what it means to work in agriculture. And we had a short conversation when we were prepping for this about demystifying, when you think of agriculture, the images that come to mind. I know Chelsea was keen to do some of that messaging. So without further ado, I won't delay it anymore. Chelsea, I'm going to hand it over to you. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you for having me today. Like Jennifer said, my name is Chelsea Foley, and I work with agriculture in the classroom Newfoundland and Labrador at the Newfoundland and Labrador Federation of Agriculture, which is a lot of words for I work in agriculture education. We're very lucky here in Newfoundland that we're under the umbrella of the Federation of Agriculture. It gives us a really good connection to the farmers and the agriculture professionals here in Newfoundland and Labrador. And it gives us access to them to help us with the messaging we want to get through. So Ag in the Classroom, we connect youth to agriculture through education. So we've been really active in the K-6 school system here in Newfoundland. We have our Little Green Thumbs program where students are growing produce directly in their classrooms. Our Little Green Sprouts, which is a small microgreen garden where students are growing. And then we got in our 7 to 12, we kind of focus more on the career aspect side of things, because when I was in high school, I graduated 20 years ago, but I never would have thought that I would be in agriculture. I never thought about it then. I didn't think about it after high school. And I will say I kind of fell into this a little bit, but at the same time, I am so happy I did, because I learn new things constantly. And then you have people like Heather that come on board, and we just keep learning. Things are constantly changing in agriculture. So like Jennifer said, when you hear the word agriculture, to me, I'm trying to change, or we're trying to change the vision that someone gets in their head of a farmer. They think the overall is a pitchfork and they're just slapping up manure, and that's what a farmer is. But I'm a woman in agriculture, and I'm not a farmer. I barely have a green thumb, to be honest with you. I shouldn't even be allowed to be called a little green thumb. I help them grow, but I'm not the best at it. But again, I'm learning. It's things I've learned along the way, and definitely something that I didn't think I would be involved in. But the agriculture industry here in Newfoundland is growing, and not to make a pun, but it is growing and things are changing. And you're seeing more women involved in agriculture. We actually partner with the Young Farmers program here in the office, and we've done a whole series on women in agriculture in our YouTube channel, and it focuses on different women in different facets of agriculture. We have people doing egg farming and dairy farming and vegetable farming and loads of different things. We're currently working with to do some on our veterinarians and things that you wouldn't think about that are still in agriculture. You know, I go into a lot of classrooms and I say, what is agriculture to you? And I get plants, farming, nothing else. So when we're talking about it, we're not realizing, yeah, the farmer puts a seed in the soil, but how healthy is that soil? What's in that soil? Who is involved in telling you what's in that soil? You don't think about the soil scientists, the plant specialists, the crop disease specialists. People, things are happening in this world. I know I was telling the ladies about a farmer we had who had to throw out 20,000 pounds of turnip or something, an obscene amount of turnip, because she cut it open and it was bright pink. And we all know that's not what color turnip is supposed to be. So she had to get it all tested. They looked into it. Everybody at the Department of Agriculture was scratching their heads. Nobody knew. It turned out that because of the microclimate where she is in Lethbridge, she was actually, they had a plant or soil disease that actually woke up after hundreds of years of being dormant. So things like that can happen. And then not only are we wasting 20,000 pounds of turnip, we wasted her time, her energy, the water that went into watering the turnip, and the waste of the turnip then also leads to things like climate change, and a waste of food leads to climate change. So it's things like that that people don't think about. But along the way, those people involved in even helping her fix that situation were many people, accountants and engineers, things like that. And then, of course, soil specialists who had to tell her you can no longer plant certain crops in that field. So I will say, you know, I didn't think I would be here, and I'm very, very glad I am. And it's definitely something that I would encourage if somebody was interested in thinking about agriculture or anything like that, to get involved in some way, shape, or form, a summer job, or, you know, test it out. You don't have to, you might not want to be a farmer, but that doesn't mean you can't be in the agriculture industry in some way, shape, or form.
Stephanie, can I ask you one thing that bubbled up? You said, I kind of fell into it. So what, can you tell me what that looked like for you? What, you know?
So I was in MUN for a very long time, undecided what I was doing. And then I was doing a focus in psychology on child development. And I
Wow.
was so far into that, and I realized I liked working with children, whether I was going to,
Yeah.
you know, be a teacher or be, you know, the usual things you kind of think of. Teachers are amazing. We love them. I do not know how they do it every day, but I didn't know what I wanted to be. I just knew I wanted to work with youth. And then I
Right.
kind of took some time off because felt like I was just wasting money, not knowing what I really wanted to do. And then I got accepted to the community studies program at the College of the North Atlantic. And I went there for 2 years, and I did some work with a lot of nonprofit organizations. We focused on psychology and youth justice and just youth care work. And we
Yeah.
did a lot of work with Thrive, Communities Against Violence. And then Federation of Agriculture. I kind of came back and did some internships with Eastern Health and Big Brothers Big Sisters. And then my mother was actually working at the Federation of Agriculture doing Open Farm Day, and they needed help with some of their mail outs. So I kind of came into the office every now and then. I was working part-time in retail and part-time at the Federation. And then all of a sudden they had a 6-month contract for agriculture in the classroom. I was like, well, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
And that was 10 years ago. So
That's a fantastic career story. And that's why
yeah,
I like to show people
yeah,
how you can get to where you are by pivots and twists and turns and different things moving forward. And the fact
yeah,
that you were unaware of what you really wanted to do and things just
yeah.
started falling in place as you put yourself out there more in different places. So thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
for sure. That was the biggest thing too. And here at the Federation, I'm very lucky in that I've also worked in different positions within that. So even though the 6-month contract turned into 10 years, it happened that way because nonprofit is so unpredictable,
Yes, it is.
is the
Yeah.
nice word for that. So I kind of went from ag in the classroom and the Federation doing part-time at both. Then I worked on a national project called Agri-Risk. So I was working very closely with farmers in that and traveling across the province. And then again, back to agriculture in the classroom full-time. So I've been with ag in the classroom full-time since 2018. And I've gotten to travel all across the country and meet different farmers and meet different ag professionals and, share our stories with each other. And it's just been so inspiring to hear what other people are doing. And it gives us great ideas to feed off each other. Like, we write a lot of storybooks here in Newfoundland and Labrador at Ag in the Classroom. And so we involve the farmers along the process. We get to talk to experts in that field. We just did a storybook. It's not out yet, but it's about veterinarians. So we got to talk to a lot of veterinarians and health and animal safety. So some things that I didn't even realize, that we have to do in Newfoundland and Labrador for biosecurity issues between farmers. So there's a lot of things people don't think about when they go to Lester's for a day and see the
100%.
animals. They don't see the care that goes behind it, everything that goes into it, the feed. We're facing big issues here in Newfoundland because things are just getting more expensive.
We are definitely, and I think the more we can focus on how we can provide our own
Mm-hmm.
food security. I mean,
Yep.
technology out there today, like to me, it's just like, yeah, this is the time.
Yep.
So Heather, sorry, Chelsea, you mentioned at least a half dozen different careers in just talking about agriculture.
Yeah.
So you sound like you would be a good person to talk to if someone were thinking, wow, I'm career exploring and I'm wondering, is there,
Yep.
it sounds like, talk with people with their hands in the soil to wearing suits to
Yeah.
in a lab.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, it's funny because I was talking to a hydroponic farmer recently and he said, well, I didn't really want to be a farmer and get dirty. So I went into hydroponics. So he's like, I get to wear what I want. My clothes don't get dirty and it's great. I don't work with soil and I'm all good. I just work with water and there's no pests in my barn because they're not outside. So it's perfect. But, yesterday, actually, we did an event and a student came up to me afterwards and asked, I'm really into math and chemistry. Is there anything in the agriculture industry that would be, applicable with that? And I thought of you, Heather, because I was like, well, I was like, business advisors, trade commodity people, like accountants, all that stuff is math, chemistry, plant science, soil science, pesticides or entomologists. You don't think about that. There's entomologists in agriculture that are studying the pests that come after our crops. So, and our biggest pest is moose sometimes. So, there's things that people have to think about that, people don't think can be involved in agriculture. A lot of people, when I was younger, wanted to be a vet. I didn't know you had to become a different type of vet to be involved with farm animals. So, those things are there. It's just a matter of exploring those options and finding what fits you and your interests. Because I probably wouldn't be the best farmer, but I love agriculture education.
I love that. That's amazing, Chelsea. It sounds like you do a really good job with getting that word out there to,
I try.
yeah. the enthusiasm is there, and that's really key when you're especially working with younger kids.
Mhm.
I had another. Oh, so it sounds like, your story about Lethbridge. I mean, it sounds like with everything that's going on in the world too, that more and more
Mhm.
focus will be put in. Let's avoid having people to have to get rid of such a high amount of
Exactly.
vegetables and stuff. So again, for the people with the real sciencey brains who want to figure out the reasonings behind
Mhm.
opportunities for that. But then I think about some of the women that I've worked with over the years who's like, I want to be out active outside, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
maybe they're the ones that want to be out in the field, literally.
Yeah, and there's people like agronomists that are out there trying to figure out types of new crops that we can grow as our climate is changing, you know? So that's something that is coming up. Maybe our growing season, maybe our growing season will get longer. Who knows? You know, these things, as everything's changing, we have to try to adapt to the environment that we're in, and we have to also think about the sustainability of that. So we have to think about how we want to preserve our soils and how we want to preserve our land that we're using for our own benefit, you know?
Soil is so important. I don't, I could geek out on it because I guess because I'm a foodie.
Yeah,
I
for
just
sure.
know soil is and its composition and its health is so important to everything. It's all interconnected. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's exciting to me. And for people out there exploring careers, I'm like, yeah, definitely spend some time
Yeah, for
exploring this
sure.
industry.
Yeah. And I will say too, Newfoundland and Labrador has been doing a new project with Living Labs, and they're really focusing on that soil health and
Love it.
carbon and use, and just making sure that we are preserving our soil for the future and may come after us, right? You know, I might not have to deal a lot with the climate change issues that are happening, but our next generation is going to really be
100%.
impacted because they've been the ones, you know, that are getting the impacts of what we're doing now. They're going to get it, and then their children are going to get it even worse. So, you know, we got to think about it now. So it's very important to us. And we've been really lucky here at Ag in the Classroom that the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, so that is a government funding, a shared government funding between federal and provincial and territorial that allows us to do this work, right? So
Oh
we've
yeah,
been core funded for about 10, 11 years now. So
that's excellent.
we've been very, very lucky in that sense. And hopefully we're not going anywhere anytime soon because we want to
It's
see
kind of
the
important.
impacts. Yeah, for sure.
Excellent. So did you have anything else, any other or reviews, or well, you will have a chance again to speak
Yes, for
if
sure. If anyone has any questions,
there
I can
may be
answer them
questions
after.
and stuff.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much, Chelsea. I really
no
enjoyed
problem.
hearing about your work.
Thank you.
Over to you, Heather. I'm really interested in your piece as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here as well. So thank you, Kara, for having me, and to the young farmers for the opportunity. Um, I have a bit of an unusual career path, I think. I've only actually worked in agriculture for about 2 or 3 years. Um, so I think that might be why I was invited here today. Um, but even though I'm changing careers after a decade in medical research almost. I think a lot about my experience has actually been an advantage. So yeah, I'll talk a bit about my career path when I first thought I might want to be a farmer. And then I also want to talk a little bit about the industry, some of the challenges that farmers are facing here locally. You've already touched on it with the climate change and how changing environmental conditions are leading to different problems that farmers have never had to deal with before.
Hmm.
Um, and it can be a bit stressful to think about, kind of where we are, how we got here, and how we can kind of fix some of those problems that we're facing. Um, but kind of on the career side, these challenges have created some amazing opportunities for to contribute to the industry in ways that you might not have thought of before. I grew up here in Newfoundland, in the city. My parents are accountants. My brother is an economist, and my other brother is a quantum physicist. So
Wow.
We are not, we're not farmers at all. We didn't really grow food. And then way back, my family mostly fished, so which was much bigger here. Um, so when I was about 13 years old, my best friend, she got to go to this vet camp at UPEI, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I was so jealous. I begged my parents to let me go. They were like, "Okay, well, you can apply, and if you get in, we'll take the family and go on a little vacation." And I could attend this camp. So I spent a week at the University, Prince Edward Island, when I was about 14, and we looked at the different types of vets that you could be. You know, cats and dogs, and then kind of exotic animals, vets who work in zoos, things like that, rehabilitation facilities, and then kind of the agricultural vets who deal with farm animals. And I fell in love. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I thought this is definitely what I want to do with my life. And I told my parents, and they're like, "You're crazy. You don't like being cold. You don't like being dirty. You don't like being
All the
outdoors.
things.
Why do you want to be a farmer? And why do you want to work in that industry?" And I was like, "Well, okay, yeah, you're probably right." So for many, many years, I never thought I would end up in agriculture. I went to St. FX in Nova Scotia, which will be important again in a little while. And I actually studied chemistry. After that, I worked in medical research, mostly human genomics, for most of my career, um, as a data scientist. And then I actually worked in manufacturing for about a year. Um, so, and then COVID happened, which I think
Mm,
shook things up for a lot of people.
yes.
So my husband's family, they farmed for many generations. If you're familiar with St. John's, the Kilbride area is a neighborhood now, but it used to be farmed by three families, and his family was one of them. And a lot of them actually still live up there. It's pretty
Interesting.
cool. It skipped a generation with his parents. They didn't farm. But my husband has always been very interested in it. We've been growing food in our backyard, just gardening since the first summer we met, which is 11 growing seasons now. Um, and he always thought that he would want to retire to kind of a homestead or a farm,
Yeah.
kind of hobby farm, that kind of thing.
Right.
And then, we were baking our own bread for the first time, worried about like and listening to the radio, and people are talking about um, there's a week of orange juice left, and there's like 3 days of fuel, and if the boats don't run, we're gonna run out. So it really scared us. And we kind of thought, like, why would we wait when the need for food security on our island was so dire right now?
Hmm.
So we started looking at um, starting our own farm. There's a really cool program here in the province that doesn't exist anywhere else in Canada, where you can lease land very cheaply from the government
Okay.
for agriculture. I think it's like $4 a hectare per year or something like that. Like these opportunities don't exist in other places. So we started looking into that. Um, One downside is the amount of time it takes. So we didn't really know, but it was years before we actually got access to that land. And then we had to get all the trees off it, get all the rocks off it. Anyway, all of that is still a work in progress. In the meantime, though, we were looking around at other places we might be able to grow, and we found the O'Brien Farm Foundation. And so they have a program where you can lease land from them. You lease a field, and you get to farm it and work it and use their equipment.
Wow.
So
That's
we've been
fantastic.
there. It's very cool. Yeah. So we've been there for 2 years now. This will be our third season this year.
Yeah.
Um, so, and yeah, that's how I became a farmer. Um, but around the time we were thinking about setting up the farm, um, I was thinking about my background in chemistry, and like as a data scientist, what could I bring to try to get things right the first time? Because agriculture there's a lot of trial and error. And because of
Yes.
the nature of agriculture, you have to wait a whole year before you can try again. So, that's a real advantage that generational farmers have. So, what kind of tech, what kind of sensors are out there that we can try to figure out what's going on and what the crops need? Because we don't have all that to rely on where my husband's parents didn't farm. Um, and so that's when we started looking at sensors and kind of monitoring environmental conditions, soil conditions, things like that. So a couple years ago, I started a company called Data Farms, and we sell weather stations. We have a soil probe. We do soil tests. Um, what else do we measure? We have a drone that collects um, very specific wavelengths of light that tell you kind of what's going on with the crop. So if you're looking at basically the wavelength of light that chlorophyll absorbs energy, and you're not seeing very much of it, that means that the crops are taking it all up and they're growing quite fast, right? And then they'll also reflect a lot of certain wavelengths if they're under any kind of stress. So, we can quickly scan from above and see how the crops are doing, assess things like weed pressure, all from these scans to see how healthy and or stressed these crops are. And then we can use that to either add more nutrients if that's what's needed. pH can also be a problem. Our soil is quite acidic here, so that's even if you have the nutrients, they might not be available to the plants if your pH goes too low. So that's kind of where I come in.
Wow.
Um,
It's quite fascinating. I was so curious when I saw that what, what exactly it entailed. So I'm just trying to understand now. So would other firms utilize this technology to use?
Absolutely.
Okay, and so from like farmers around the island would like
Yep.
approach you
Yeah.
and say, hey,
So
can you come out? And so you would go out and do these actual tests.
exactly. Yeah. So we've been working with farmers here on the island of Newfoundland for 2 growing seasons. And yeah, we're going to get out in the field quite soon this year. I'm pretty excited.
So I love how your story, again, kind of like Chelsea too, talks about the tech side of it, which is always really interesting and not so well known. And then you also have which I love the name of your farm as well. So what type of things do you grow in your farm?
Right now, we grow vegetables for the most part, and herbs and some flowers. And we'll grow like purple potatoes, which the restaurants here in St. John's love. And yeah, so that's our main customer. We sell directly to the restaurants, and
That was my next
yeah,
question.
potatoes, onions, leeks, shallots, herbs. We've done some tomatoes and peppers, all kinds of stuff. Um, the herbs are my favorite, I think.
I was gonna say, I love a good locally grown herb because the stuff you see at the supermarket always looks so sad.
Oh, it's so
Um,
nice. Your whole car smells like it. You
oh,
smell like it. It's great.
100%. And you know what? Let's face it, that's the way it's supposed to be. I really am a big proponent of you walking down and being able to walk down the road and know who raised your food and how it was raised and the care that went into it. Like I say, the more that we can do this, the better. And people listening and people career exploring and the young people, like the whole, you know, self, like, maintaining our own food supplies. I'm trying to get the word out, but I'm having one of those moments like, where we within the province take care of our own needs.
Self-sufficiency.
That's it. That's the word. Pardon me.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's totally possible.
Mhm.
Back in the 1950s, on our island, we grew 90% of the food
oh,
that we consumed on the
what?
island.
That's beautiful.
Right now, Chelsea and I were at a talk a couple weeks ago, and it was close to 10%, 10, 11% maybe that we were actually
Yeah.
producing. Um, and that's what the tech that we had,
Oh,
this
exactly.
is
Yeah.
75 years ago. Imagine what we could do now. So, that's one of the reasons I think, and Chelsea touched on it as well, that the industry here is growing, and there is so much room for new farmers and new farms to join us and to start farming before we ever have to compete with each other. Since my
Mm,
husband and I have started farming, we found everybody incredibly welcoming. They're willing to share knowledge, and it's just been a really welcoming and engaging community to join.
that's good
Um,
to know.
yeah, and something I mentioned right in the beginning that I'd kind of like to come back to a little
Sure.
bit,
Yeah,
and that's kind of the current state of agriculture here in the province, and a lot of these trends are global and national as well.
they are. Yeah.
Um, so one thing that's kind of going on right now is the changing climate. It's leading to unseasonal weather, unpredictable weather. And I was at a conference with the Federation of Agriculture back in January, and farmers were talking about how for the first time, um, they used to farm for decades, for hundreds of years, without irrigation. It's called dry farming. You rely on the rain um, and to grow the crops. But with the changing climate, there's more water, but it all happens in the beginning of the season in the spring and at the end of the season in the fall. So
Interesting.
we need more robust water drainage to make sure that the fields aren't getting really soggy, and
Hmm.
the crops can't grow if there's no air in the soil, and it leaches out the nutrients. It washes them away into the
Right.
environment, which wastes money. It's very damaging to the surrounding ecosystems. And then in the middle of the summer, it's getting very, very hot. So in the same
Mhm.
field where you needed all that drainage, now you need irrigation as well. And so these are really challenging infrastructure builds to implement in existing operations that have never relied on them before. So that's an expensive challenge that farmers are facing right now. And that's kind of just one example of how the climate is impacting farming. And Chelsea mentioned the unusual diseases that are becoming more common, or that didn't exist in our region, in our climate, are now moving north. Um, and then another thing that's impacting farmers here in Canada and in Newfoundland is a lot of government legislation is making it more expensive. And one
Hmm.
example of that is the carbon tax. And if you think about all the inputs, all the fertilizers, all the seed that you need to ship to the island, and this is tons and tons, massive amounts of weight. And every single one of those has the carbon tax applied to it when you transport it to the island and then across the island. And it builds and snowballs, and our input costs are so, so high on the island. But this is also impacting farms across Canada. And our own government is making it harder and more expensive to farm. And that's really challenging. So the input costs are rising too. Um, but you know, traditional kind of chemical fertilizers probably aren't the best thing to be adding anyway. So
Yeah.
why do we do it? Um, that kind of goes back to sustainability and what that actually means.
Right.
So right now, our planet recycles nutrients and can use that to grow new plants and to regenerate. But right now, in order to feed every person on this planet, and a lot of people don't think about it, but most of your clothes also comes from
Yeah.
agriculture, from things that we grow.
Hmm.
Um, so we can't feed and clothe everybody on this planet right now without consuming more resources than the planet can regenerate, right? That's what it means to not be sustainable.
Right.
So we need to restore that balance and figure out a way to grow crops without taking too much from the planet and taking too much from the natural ecosystems.
I love that
And
philosophy. Hmm.
and there's hope, right? We've done this for thousands and thousands of years.
Awesome. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
uh it's only pretty recently in the last couple hundred years that we've started using these
Mhm.
industrial equipment, heavy machinery, and fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides and all kinds of things like that. So when you use a lot of these things, um, the heavy machines can damage the soil and the structure and kill all the little mushrooms and bugs and fungi and things in the soil. Those things living in the soil, that's what our planet uses to recycle and to regenerate nutrients. So it's very, very important to protect that.
I agree. Do you think that there is a, an efficient, like a sufficient amount of awareness about that? Or do you think that's still something that, could use some
Well,
education?
I think it's becoming more common, and there's
Yeah,
been a big push recently to something called regenerative agriculture.
right.
It used to be beneficial management practices, and before that, best management practices, similar stuff. So it's farming in a way that takes care of the land and contributes to soil health, and basically allows the soil the opportunity to regenerate itself and continue to supply the crops with nutrients over time. And there's lots of methods that work and that can help regenerate the soil. One of them is adding organic manure, compost. That has a lot of nitrogen in it, which is important for the crops to grow, but it also has a lot of carbon. And we hear a lot about carbon in the soil. And I think most people think about just getting CO2 out of the atmosphere, but carbon in the soil has a lot of other benefits as well. Um, one of them is that it allows the soil to hold on to more water. It doesn't evaporate as quickly. So if your soil has a lot of carbon in it and you're experiencing these long stretches without rain, your crops and your soil will be resilient to that if they could hold on to the water that they received a long time ago. And,
Such a complex subject matter, like when you really,
well, it is, and it's
there's a lot
messy,
to it.
it's outdoors, there's all kinds of stuff going on, and you're part of the ecosystem. I think a lot of farmers think that they need to battle Mother Nature in order to
Mm,
try to get the best yield. Um, but I think understanding that you're part of an ecosystem, if you can understand what's in the soil and what the soil needs, then you can. My husband always says you need to grow healthy soil. You need to grow good soil before you can grow good crops.
yeah,
And I didn't really
love
know
that
what that
concept.
meant, but
Yeah.
I do now.
So would it be fair to say it would be nice to get back to some of the older ways of farming that in
Definitely.
Newfoundland? I mean, my father's family was from a remote island out, ways away. And they produced their own food enough that, and I would think that they would have had really neat ways of doing things that ensured that, this was what would sustain them through the winter. So they really couldn't fail. So I was just, getting back to some of those philosophies when it comes to, so that sounds like
It's
another career
possible.
path, a
Definitely.
sustainable mother nature
Yeah.
based.
So how do you actually do this? How do you implement these methods without sacrificing yield? Because there's a reason people have been using these chemical fertilizers and industrial methods for a
Yeah,
long time. It's that they're so, so reliable. And if you
right.
if you add that prescribed amount, you're going to get a really good yield pretty much every year. So it's very difficult to convince someone to
Yeah.
kind of replace that with methods that are more variable. So when you
Hmm.
add compost or organic amendments, um, sometimes the amount of nutrients in the compost can vary. Like cow manure is quite variable how much nitrogen is actually in it. However, if you're using chicken manure, it's like pretty much exactly the same every time. So some of these are like natural amendments can be variable, and again, that's kind of why we created data farms. If we can understand what's there and you can measure
Right.
it, you can start implementing these methods and still know that your crops have everything they need. So you can, with precise data about nutrients and about the crop health, you can start to introduce these methods gradually without sacrificing the yield that has been so consistent from these traditional
Right.
methods.
That makes a lot of
Um,
sense.
but that and that's just one thing. There's all kinds of scientists out there who are kind of developing new types of crops that are resistant on their own to pests or can grow in a
Right.
broader range of climates or that need less water to grow and to
Would you call
survive.
that, sorry, would you call it like GMOs, like genetically modified? Like, is that?
Yeah, but
Okay.
like everything you eat is. And there's lots of ways to genetically modify something. It can be through selective breeding. And I think a lot of people have heard about CRISPR recently, but there's other methods to edit DNA. Something called zinc fingers has been done for a very long time. Um, yeah, it's not necessarily a scary thing.
Right. Yeah. Wow, what a neat conversation, like I knew it was going to be. Heather, did you have anything else that you wanted to add before I move along, or?
Yeah, I think just that all these challenges that farmers are facing is what's creating the opportunities here.
Right,
Um,
right,
there's new jobs and new technology related jobs and research related jobs that are necessary because of the state of agriculture and because of the challenges that farmers are facing. And even locally, I think it's only been a couple of years since the College of the North Atlantic opened their post-secondary agriculture program. Academy Canada has a program now too. So, the industry is growing
yeah,
here.
sounds like it.
So it's a really exciting time, I
I
think.
think it is for sure. Thank you. Chelsea, did anything percolate for you as Heather was speaking that you'd like to add, or?
Yeah, and like Heather mentioned about the ag technician program at College North Atlantic, we've been working a lot. Actually, one of their instructors is our chair on the Agriculture in the
Okay,
Classroom Steering Committee. So
nice.
I'm always connecting with her to discuss, what ways the college students can get involved. We've had a lot of them volunteer with Agriculture in the Classroom as well. And they do a lot of different stuff throughout that program that kind of gives you a taste of what different things you can do in agriculture. So they learn how to drive a tractor, they learn how to get into the soil. They dirt is what's under your fingers. Sorry, soil is the proper word. Um,
I'll
but
remember that.
yeah, someone said dirt yesterday. I said, oh no, they said a bad word. But yeah, I think those things that weren't here, kind of force anyone who wanted to do something agriculture related out of the province. Whereas now the options are available and they're growing more available in our province. So things that you might not think about when you're looking at careers and you think of, anything that pops to your head, the popular careers that you might think of or whatever the case may be. But things like what Heather does, I just think it's so interesting and it's something I would have never thought in a million years would be involved with agriculture. I never would have thought the amount of technology I've seen in the last 10 years and just even the changing from the traditional dairy farming to now the robotic dairy farming, all that
Right.
stuff has just completely changed the way people are doing things. So I definitely appreciate that people like Heather, because I know a lot of work goes into this, and I know sometimes the agriculture industry can be a hard nut to crack. But with perseverance and that drive and the passion, it's so rewarding once you're there, like a lot of farmers have a very similar story when it comes to how they got their land and what they had to do to clear it and how they got to where they are now. And I
Right.
always find it super inspirational because that they really want to do it. And it's a 365-day, 7-day a week, 24/7
Sounds like it.
job. You can't just ignore your plants. They are gonna die if you do ignore them. So that is something that, a lot of people don't think about every day when we eat food. I know I can't see the fact that we're gonna need to eat more food as the years go on. There's gonna be more people, there's going to need to be more food. So we have to think about that.
For sure. Thanks, Chelsea. Stephanie, did you have anything that you wanted to add or ask or?
Yes, fascinating. What really stood out to me was that in the 1950s we were, self-sustaining, and that those possibilities are there again for us. So thank you for sharing that. I'm really curious to know which organizations supported you and to inform you and help you advance in your career. If someone was interested in agriculture, which organizations would you suggest that they connect with?
So I think the two that have had the biggest impact on us are NL Young Farmers. They have a ton of resources. They have funding for training and all kinds of cool stuff. We've gotten some amazing books from them about on the business side, how to start a farm, and also kind of really technical scientific things about how to build soil and things like that. So they've been an amazing organization to be part of. And the other one that had a big impact is the O'Brien Farm Foundation. So there is a fee to lease the land, but in addition to kind of renting or leasing the land and getting to use the equipment, they'll work with you on your business plan and help you access markets and really help you transition from growing food to a real business that itself is sustainable.
Nice.
So yeah, I think that they were
Yeah.
very important organizations for us getting started with the farm.
Thanks. What about you, Chelsea?
Yeah, and I will say too, on with the NL Young Farmers, they have a mentorship program. So if somebody was interested in becoming a farmer, you could be paired with a mentee who has been farming in Newfoundland for however long in your region, and they will help assist throughout that process in partnering you with a mentee for farming. So I think they've had at least 3 that I know of off the top of my head, successful mentorship programs where people who became involved with it are now farming today. So the NL Young Farmers is a great organization for that. And of course, the Federation of Agriculture, they've been growing themselves. We went from a staff of 3 a couple of years ago to now I think we have 12 staff members or 13. So it's definitely something you see. Things are changing in the agriculture industry here in Newfoundland and Labrador, and I think people are starting. I think like Heather said, like COVID really made people think about where your food's coming from. A lot of people started their own gardens and they started their own thing, and with Little Green Thumbs, I know I work a lot with youth and children, so in Little Green Thumbs, you see people you see the children try new things they never would have tried at home. And it's seeing that spark their interest so young in agriculture and food that kind of keeps me going. It's one of the things that I'm like, oh, okay, like this is great. Like eventually, whether or not everybody becomes a farmer, that's fine. But, they're going to be more informed consumers, and they're going to appreciate where their food comes from, and they're going to know where their food comes from. So that's something that is a huge goal for us. And I have to thank the Federation and, of course, the Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership, because Ag in the Classroom would not be successful without the support from our government and from the Federation of Agriculture and all of our organizations like Young Farmers, O'Brien's, Food First, and a lot of these places really support Ag in the Classroom and volunteer with us every now and then. So we really appreciate that.
It's fantastic. I've noticed the literatures in the schools, and so are a lot of the projects. There, you have it right there.
I'm doing class pack-ups now, so we're in the middle of Canadian Agriculture Literacy Month, so I'm kind of.
Thank you, and I think if we can keep that spark alive right through school, then we will have a really great future for agriculture. So thank you.
We'll have more Heathers.
That's right.
Thanks, Stephanie, and thanks for your answers. We'll move into the question and answer segment of this session now. Sometimes we don't often get a lot of questions, but after we'll get people reach out to us and want to get connected with one or both of you or whatever. We did have one question, and it surrounds having the education base in agriculture, a couple degrees in agriculture, but yet not being able to attach to the workforce in that field. So passion, education, but not translating into job opportunities. Would you have any resources or just little tidbits of advice for this person?
I think something that has helped me, I guess, started two businesses isn't the same as looking for a job, so my perspective is a little bit different. But, building relationships and getting to know people in the industry is so important. I didn't learn until this year that there's actually 100 employees of our provincial government who work in agriculture. So,
Wow.
like, there are definitely opportunities in agriculture. And when we were first starting out with the process of trying to get our own land, we'd be emailing with people, sometimes talking to people on the phone, and then, um, after a couple of years, I went to, or my husband and I went to our first conference, and we actually met these people in person. It's like, oh, hey, you're that guy, and I think having the opportunity to talk to them, even just like showing them pictures of what we've grown, what we've done, it give it gave us more credibility to be able to talk to these people in person. I think farmers and people who are interested in agriculture, a lot of us have a bit of an old school attitude and really prefer those face-to-face relationships to build
Mm-hmm.
trust. It's definitely something I've noticed in the industry, both since starting the farm and basically as a service provider for farmers through data farms. So, if there's local events and they happen all across the province, that's my recommendation is to go and to talk to these people. The first time I went, I was very intimidated. Um, and didn't know very many people, asked a bunch
Yeah.
of questions that I felt were not very bright. But
That's not true. I was
anyway,
there.
but then a couple years later, I was there again, and it's all the same people that I've been hanging out
Right.
with and chatting with for a couple of years,
Makes sense.
and the reception and you know the conversations were so different. It was more collaborative, and um, yeah. That would be my recommendation
So
is try
net
to
sounds
attend
like you're
some
saying
face-to-face
networking.
events and network. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's
Yeah.
across the
Which
board for
makes,
job hunting anyway,
but yeah, no, I liked how you highlighted that it, had an impact on you and it's your lived experience, which is always nice to share. How about you,
yeah, it
Chelsea?
definitely did with these same people that you're trying to break in with. So hopefully it
Right.
helps.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and I would echo that, and I would also say, you can't go out to farms and speak to people. If there's farmers markets in your area, get out there and talk to people, talk to the farmers. If you're looking for more of a, a research job or a office job type situation, you can contact your agriculture rep in your region and even discuss with them what's going on in the agriculture industry. Maybe they know something that's popping up left, right, and center. That things are evolving constantly and people are retiring constantly, and there's a lot of
Right.
opportunities opening in the agriculture industry. In Canada alone, 1 in 9 jobs are in the agriculture and food industry. So I would say don't get discouraged and keep it up, keeping your eyes out and just talk to people, like Heather said. I think the networking side of it is a big thing, and finding out what's new and what's going on out there can be super helpful.
Perfect. That's great advice. Perfect. I love how you mentioned the retirement thing because I think
Yeah.
it's something that it's impacting quite a few industries, and I wouldn't think agriculture is any different from, what we see coming. We talk about a lot of it in trades,
Yep.
but yes, yeah. Um, I'm not seeing any more questions pop up in our chat, but Kara, the lovely Kara, thank you, gave me some backup questions. So it's always nice to have those. I'm really curious about what you'll have to offer when we talk about women specifically wanting to enter this field. Do you think women could face any challenges specifically? Like, is there things that bubble up for you that you might say, yeah, like this could be something to think about, or you want to demystify some sort of myth that women may hold about going into agriculture?
I don't know if Heather wants to take that first because she's a woman farmer, so
Sure.
she okay.
Yeah, I can take this one. I think I think there are additional barriers for women to get into agriculture, particularly if you want to be a farmer yourself and you want to be the business owner. Um, and it's not specific to agriculture, but because of the way our parental leave and maternity leave system is set up in the country, it's through employment insurance. So if you're a business owner, uh,
Mm,
you're not eligible. So I know of many families, many other farmers who have decided that, the husband will own the business and the wife will be an employee, or she'll keep a
right.
separate job at another company on top of all the farming work, just in order to keep qualifying for those benefits.
Right.
So, it can be challenging for women who want to grow their business and also their families, because we don't have access to the same benefits that women who are employed by other companies have when starting their families. And that kind of thing can have long-term consequences as well. Especially if the marriage doesn't work out and that woman wants to go on and start her own business, she doesn't have that history. Even if she did all the work on paper, she doesn't have that history
Mhm.
of being a business owner. She doesn't have the relationships with the banks and access to
Interesting.
credit.
Yeah.
So
Never thought of it.
the
That.
decisions that you make around the time around family planning, even though they seem like it might be valuable and save you money and get you more money in the short term, they can have very long-reaching consequences on your career development. Um, and to be totally honest with you, when I started my own business, I didn't know this. Um, I found out after, and I don't think I would have done anything differently, but I think there are definitely additional barriers that women face that men don't.
Well, it's good to bring these up as if, we have women in the audience that never would have thought about that, right? Just for them to think about for their own futures and stuff. Yeah. Thanks,
And
Heather.
I will say too, there's a new organization forming in Newfoundland and Labrador called Women in Agriculture NL. It
Okay.
had been kind of dormant for a long time, and they've been bringing that back. So they just got incorporated and are starting a new organization that myself and Heather have sat at some meetings as well with them. And I think they could be a great asset and a great help to some women in agriculture that are looking for opportunities and a support system for people who are struggling to get started or, trying to find a job in the agriculture industry. So that might be an option as well. And something that I didn't think about that we've talked at some of these meetings about is the equipment and the coveralls and the steel toe boots and things like that that don't fit a lot of women, whether it's
It
the,
costs like 4 times as much and it's worse
Wow.
quality.
yep.
Oh,
It's so frustrating.
Mm-hmm. I
that would
didn't
be
think of that,
frustrating.
right? And like you have to
Yeah,
get something special for the tractor so that you can reach a certain thing, or the safety issues become involved then when you
it
might be
does.
you're not 6 feet tall or whatever the case may be. So those kind of things, like people don't even, I didn't think about it until we got in a group of women who are in farming to realize that.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point. That working as a farmer, there's a high risk of injury,
Mm-hmm.
and what a lot of people don't really think about, but is very common, is like back injuries from repetitive work. And this is something that men and women face. But when you look at me and my husband, he is so much stronger than me. It
Oh, I
doesn't
was
mean
gonna
I
say
can't
taller.
help. He's that too. Um, but the labor does have an impact on your body as well. As much as you try to take care of yourself, it gets really stressful. And if you have a lot to do, um, you're just going to do it, right? Um, yeah.
Yeah, again, good awareness. These are definitely good things to know. Um, so what about what have you noticed in the years that you've been in this field in terms of the demand for like agricultural professionals? Do you feel like there's lots of like job opportunities, or is it more about creating your own? In like if I went on a job bank now and looked, would I find anything in the agriculture field, or is it more like creating your own business type thing or your own farm, I guess too, but
I think both. There's opportunities across the board. I know, like I said earlier, the government is one of the biggest employers in agriculture, federal and provincial. And seasonally, labor is required on all the farms. So you don't have to be a business owner. And you know that kind of lifestyle isn't suited for everybody. A lot of people find it very stressful to have employees and to be responsible for managing cash flow and making sure that not only your mortgage
right.
is paid, but 10 people's mortgages are paid. So, you know, there's huge opportunities to start a new farm. We definitely don't have enough, but you know, you also don't need to be that type of person who likes hard work, who likes being outdoors and cold and dirty. People like that, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, there's opportunities for jobs as well as to start your own thing,
Mhm.
I think.
Excellent.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say the exact same thing. I was gonna say both. I think, there's opportunities to just start small by talking to people and seeing, what is available. And maybe you just want to work part-time somewhere and get the feel of it and see if you like it. We've had students do interns on, say, a dairy farm and also like a vegetable farm, and then they realize which one they like better, or do they like either. I think the dairy farm had a intern, or the dairy farm close to here, sorry, had an intern that ended up deciding they were going to go do veterinary school because they really wanted to work with the large animals now. So, those opportunities are there, and it's something that unless you try it, you're never going to know if you like it. So I would suggest, any fears or intimidations that you might have, kind of just go for it and try it out and get your hands full of soil and see if you like it.
That's so true. And that's some of the premises that we go by at Women in Resource Development, is encouraging women to just have that experience of hands-on,
Mm-hmm.
you at the helm of whatever it is you're interested in,
Mm-hmm.
trying your hand at different things and making your own informed decision based on your own interests and skills and abilities, not what somebody else thinks that might be good or not good for you, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
a good point. I guess I'll ask one more question, and then it's kind of segues into what you said. And what role do you think educational institutions in Newfoundland play in preparing students for careers in agriculture? So that could be secondary or post-secondary. Like,
I'm like,
you're
oh, do you
like,
have
where
another
do I
one for
start?
us? Yeah, I will say there's definitely some things that we all need to think about. Working with the Department of Education the last few years, we find where agriculture education kind of fits in our K-6 realm. We've struggled with 7 to 12, and if I think back, I don't remember doing anything that really had anything to do with agriculture, but it's the life skills really that we're looking at, right? Growing your own food, doing your taxes. It's just things that, driving, even things that we all have to do in life, that maybe we should be incorporating into the curriculums in K-12, and then that gives people the option, or gives them the thought of like, oh, maybe I do want to be a cook, maybe I do want to be a farmer, maybe I do want to be, something that you might
Right.
not have thought of before. Maybe not an accountant, but maybe maybe you really like math. So
Yeah.
that's something that, I kind of wish had been available to me when I was going through school. And I think we're heading in the right direction with our post-secondary, with including new opportunities for people across the island and new programming, and kind of steering people in the direction that there is so much out there that we can look at for a career opportunity. And that's something we're all going to need to eat. We're all going to need people to grow it. We're all going to need people to test it and to, make sure that it's healthy for everybody. So I think that's super important to get that messaging out there. And we started in the way that we can, and we've grown majorly since in the last 12, 13 years at Agriculture in the Classroom. So it's been really encouraging to see, because I think people's attitudes towards food and agriculture are changing. And I think
so
we're
too.
I think we're only going to continue to see that grow.
I agree especially with everything happening right now. It's like, how can we, self-support ourselves without too much outside help and stuff? And I'd love to see that for Newfoundland. I really think Newfoundland could spearhead a lot of like bioregionalism and self-sufficiency. I got the word out this time, but just barely. I think it's exciting to think of the opportunities. So again, and you kind of touched on this, and the messaging I've heard from women in the last 14 years that I've worked with is, I wish I had known about this in school. I wish I had known. I wish someone told me. I was like, oh, right. So that obviously it's very important. Heather, did you have any final comments on that topic?
Yeah, I agree. It's incredibly important. I mentioned way in the beginning that I went to school in Nova Scotia and that it would come back, and here it is. So I found growing up here, there wasn't very much focus on agriculture. We learned a lot about the fishery in
Right.
school, and we hardly talked about farming. But when I went to Nova Scotia, it was a much bigger part of the economy, and they had the agricultural college, and I think people just understood that you could be an accountant, you could be a software developer and still work in the agriculture industry.
Right.
But that perception, I didn't think it when I lived here, and I still feel that people see agriculture very traditionally here. So I think the work that
Right.
Chelsea's doing is incredibly important.
I do too.
And we try to do it as well, as much as possible. We had some Cub Scouts come to our farm and help us dig potatoes last year. And oh my goodness, they got tired, they got cold, and they didn't get very many potatoes. And I think that, and the parents loved it, because I think it was the first time that they had seen where their food actually comes from other than the supermarket. And they actually got to work for it, and they all got to take home some potatoes that they dug themselves, which I think was really cool. But the work that the post-secondary education is also doing is very important, because we've talked a lot today about how there aren't enough farms and we need new farms. So when you have people like my husband and I who don't have that generational knowledge, and we don't have a strong network of mentors, we we need to learn this from scratch. These programs didn't exist a few years ago. So I think that we really need that here if we're going to grow the industry, and we're going to create more jobs and more opportunities in agriculture.
Lovely. I love that messaging. I think lessening the gap between people and where their food comes from is so important. And I think
And I was just as bad. Like, I'm a city person, so up until a few years ago, I didn't know a lot of this stuff, right? I think I was in my 20s before I saw a Brussels sprout growing out of the ground. I had no idea what they looked like. They look very silly. Kind of like
they look like a musical instrument, right?
Yeah, or kind of like AI trying to imagine how a Brussels sprout would grow. It's strange.
Myself growing up around the Bay, I guess I would have been exposed to Nan and Pop's vegetable garden, where they grew the turnips, carrots, and that sort of thing. But I'm the one at the grocery store that's like, why do I buy something that's organic but from the other side of the world, or something that's not labeled organic but it's grown like in Lethbridge, right? So this is me at the grocery store going, what do I do? And I tend towards the local anyway, because I'm like, why am I buying stuff from God knows where, when there's people, lovely people down the road growing it. So it's kind of like, yeah.
Well, you taste the difference too,
Oh,
right?
you can, 100%. I would
What a
think
lot of
that,
people don't realize about local food as well is it's actually much healthier.
Oh yeah.
Because as soon as that plant is plucked out of the ground, as soon as it's harvested, it dies and it starts to decompose. So you get it 2
nice,
or 3 weeks later, right? And all
right?
of those nutrients have already started to break down. And that's why you lose the flavor and it
Mhm.
loses some of its texture and starts to become squishy. So even before it's actually like gone bad, a lot of the nutrients have already broken down.
Yeah.
So local food is actually healthier for you.
I can see that. And yeah, and the more we make the choice to buy that bag of carrots from Lethbridge, just like this power, we have the buying power, right? To make,
We do.
to
Oh yeah, you
steer
don't need to be a farmer to make a
No.
difference. You can
100%. It's in our
support local
pocket.
farmers, buy from local farms, buy your food from the farmers market. Everybody can do that. Like we can all be part of making our personal supply chains and our family supply chains more sustainable.
And we're all
For
about
sure.
that here in Newfoundland. We're all about supporting ourselves and so yeah, no, I think it's lovely to
Yeah.
emphasize that.
And think about the people
Well,
who came before us for hundreds of years surviving on
this
this
rock.
island, right? We can
Yeah.
do it too.
They didn't have
Oh,
skip the
100%.
dishes. So we don't, we can do without some of the things that we think we
I
need.
agree. I agree, Chelsea, 100%. Stephanie, I see that you've unmuted yourself.
Yeah,
Did
I
you?
mean, you just made me think about the fact that historically women have always been involved with agriculture, and that you're the face that represents that diversity still exists, and it's really important for us to also advocate for those barriers, like maternity leave and proper attire and clothing and tools to face these careers.
There's
So
huge
thank you for
things.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's so important to talk about the challenges and get them out there and hopefully addressed.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's 3:19. Time has went by really quickly because we've all been engrossed in this lovely conversation. Heather and Chelsea, thank you again so much for agreeing to come on today. We really appreciate it. And like I said, this is a lovely series that can be disseminated out to other people and shared. So that's lovely. And Kara, the WRDC person, thank you, Kara, for helping to put this together for us. Um, oh, am I still on? Yes. I wanted to mention, and Stephanie will be spearheading this event at the end of March. We'll be showcasing the fisheries field and having some guest speakers with that. So I'm really excited for that one too. It's going to be good. I'm not seeing any questions in the question box. And Kara just popped the link in register for fisheries. I'm sure it's going to be a neat experience as well. Thank you to the people that signed up today, and that's it for me. Oh, we have see, I knew I was going to forget something. We'd love to hear about your experience with this. So if anyone would like to scan that QR code and answer a few questions. It helps us make these sessions better if we hear from people to say, why don't you do this or less of that and that kind of stuff. Well, everyone enjoy the rest of your week, and thanks again to our speakers, and thanks for everyone who attended.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.